Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, that's awesome. I won't distract you. I know.
Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to the Grower Panel. I'm Melanie Giesler. I'm with the Institute for Applied Ecology, and I'm here with Julia Michaels, who's a co-organizer for this panel and also a panelist herself representing Hedgerow Farms. Today, we're going to hear the grower perspective on the native seed supply chain and economics. And our panel dovetails with a seed user panel that's on Thursday morning, so you should check it out. It's also addressing the native seed supply chain. So it's pretty obvious without growers, we wouldn't have a native seed supply chain. And we're really fortunate to have 8 incredible growers here today to share their knowledge. And each of these growers has a different production and seed economic model. Some of them do contract production, some of them do federal IDIQ contracts, some of them grow seeds on speculation, some collect seeds themselves, do their own wild collections, and some buy seeds from other growers. Julia?
Sure. So one of the things we wanted to address is that, I'm supposed to do this. One of the challenges is that restoration practitioners may not be always able to get access to the seed that they want for several reasons. And one of the reasons is that some of the criteria isn't always the most feasible for production. So genetically diverse seeds can affect yields and be less profitable than varietal fields occasionally. So yields per acre may be lower than varietals due to variable flowering and seed set. So that's a challenge for growers. Field isolation is also a challenge that we face. Highly local sources may not be broadly applicable, and that can affect marketability. So that's another thing that we as growers face. And we want our seeds to be readily available for sale at reasonable costs, but it takes a long time to develop occasionally, different ecotypes. And if lower yields with our ecotype material, the cost can go up. So, these are all things that we have to consider when we start to ramp up our production of local ecotypes. And so the outcome of this panel is we really want to, increase common understanding about what's possible for native seed production, what's difficult for us as growers, and how we can work together as the seed growers and the seed users to really create change that better supports the native seed economy. So we're hoping that you all enjoy this panel and that there will be plenty of time for Q&A. And we're going to start with, who's going first?
Okay, so here's our schedule. Each of these panelists is going to briefly tell us about their farming operation, and then they're going to highlight a seed supply chain topic. And here's a preview of the topics that will be discussed. And you'll have a couple of minutes to ask each of the panelists questions, but please save your more general questions for the end when we do a Q&A, and you can address all the panelists. We'll have a 5-minute break midway, but don't go too far because we'll start presentations again at 4:10. And as I said, at the end, we'll be doing a 10-minute Q&A. And if you don't get all of your questions answered, there is a poster session after this, and several of the panelists have said, come find us, we'd be happy to continue the conversation. So with that, we will go to our first speaker. Let me introduce Brett Bammert. He is the president of Bammert Seed Company.
Thank you, Melanie. As she said, I'm Brett Bammert, president of Bammert Seed Company, and my topic is the timeline for bringing new plant genetics to market. But before we get started there, I wanted to give you a little introduction into who we are and what we do. So Bammert Seed Company has been producing native grass seed since 1951. We sell over 400 different species throughout the course of a year. and grow somewhere around 120 to 150 ecotypes and varieties. Field sizes, as you can see, are between half an acre to 260 acres, and have 132 production fields that we push on an annual basis, native fields. So 30 of these fields are less than 5 acres, and 102 are 5 acres or more. We've continued to grow into these smaller production acre fields over the last few years to help increase diversity and have seen that demand from the market. So our processing facilities, we have three lines, 2 of which are fully automated. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unmanned, which is kind of cool. The capacity is not, throughput is not a large volume, but running overnight like that sure helps us stay ahead of the game. We also can automate more if the need arises. We run those plants about 10 or 11 months out of the year. So we have some excess capacity, but with some more automation, I think we could increase that if the need arises. All right, so our team, the most important part, our success comes when our customers are successful. Our most important goal is to help that customer create their vision on their property, whatever that means to them. And so we have a great team that can help do that. I'm really proud of the folks we have, and they really have a lot of expertise in the industry. So combined 217 years, which seems like a lot to me being pretty young, but we've got a great team. So all right, so my topic's the timeline for bringing new genetics to market. Kind of run through this. Years 1 through 3, we don't personally go out and collect new genetics to put in a production setting. We rely on the plant material centers, nonprofits, other government organizations to do that. We will do some native harvest and local collections, but we will not move those into a production field. So in years 1 through 3, you've got to identify the source location. You're making multiple trips back and forth to evaluate maturity and estimate the harvest timeline. And then you've got to collect it, clean it, harvest it, test it. And then at that point, it's ready to go to a commercial producer. So one caveat in this is if you are a plant material center or wanting to do some evaluations in the meantime, before it goes to a production field, they could certainly have anywhere between 3 and 10 years of evaluation that you could add to this between this first, no, I didn't even get to see it, between this first slide of years 1 through 3 and year 4. So as I go to year 4, that could be 14 just as easy as it's 4 based on the evaluation timeline. In year 4, we get that seed, send it to the greenhouse. It usually spends about 8 to 10 weeks there before it's ready to transplant, and we can transplant about 2 to 3 acres a day. That first year, we do get a limited harvest. It's probably 30 to 50% of what we would expect in the following years. So years 5 through 6, we build up basically parent seed inventory because most of the time we get a handful of seed. So we do this 1 acre field, and we're wanting to go to a 10, 15, 20 acre field. And so we're basically harvesting that 1 acre year after year, trying to build up enough inventory that we can plant a larger production field. So a lot of times we are limited by the cost of the transplants. We probably have enough seed to transplant larger production fields to begin with. But it's cost prohibitive unless there is some large demand out there that's willing to pay for that up front. So, and we would love to drill seed, but just the parent seed availability isn't there to do that. So years 7 and 8, we drill seed for that larger production field. We could skip 4 through 8 if we hadn't had more seed to begin with. So we could speed the process up, 5 years if we didn't have to spend all that time building it up. All right, so year 9, we finally get to harvest the first field that we feel like we're going to be able to sell. So there again, clean it, harvest it, test it, and then it's available to the market in year 10. Remember, if they did evaluations that this year 10 could also be anywhere between 15 and 20 years, depending on how long their evaluations are. But it takes us 10 years to go from a handful of seed to something that's commercially available on a large scale. This is a long process. It takes long-term vision and commitment from the industry and the companies that are doing these. I know it's a lot of time and commitment from those that are collecting and evaluating these genetics. And so it is not a short-term game. We're happy to do it, but it does take a while, and we appreciate the part that everybody plays in that. So I will turn it over for questions if anybody has any. Dun, dun, dun. So the original 1 acre fields, we typically leave in about 7 years because we can certify those all the way through that 7-year mark. That's our parent seed field. So we're going to want to try to build up. We very rarely will ever sell any of that seed off that first 1 acre field because that's our parent seed for all new future fields. And so about 5 to 7 years, I would say. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. I would say a lot of the 5 acre fields and smaller are probably, I think there's 30 of them, somewhere around there, I would say, are new genetics that we're kind of working on. Sir in the back. Yes, sir. Sure. Yeah. So, I think the main thing that we look at going into these ecotypes is it's a long time horizon. So we've got 10 years of effort basically before we get to sell 1 pound of seed. And so as compared to these varieties that we've been growing for years and years that we have enough planting seed in stock to start a new 250 acre field, there's a lot lower economic threshold for us to want to put those in. We have got to be pretty well assured on the backside of these ecotypes that we have a market to sell that into, and that market is willing to see the value in that seed and willing to be committed and pay the price for that at the end. And so that's one of the largest challenges we see when we're producing these smaller production fields, is just trying to be assured on the back end that we have a customer that's willing to buy them. I mean, we're willing to do. Yes, ma'am.
Brett, do you have a proportion in your mind of how many of the things that you originally start growing actually make it through to year 10 and you have a product to sell?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would say most of them. Very seldom do. I mean, I guess we have started a couple of things in the greenhouse and ended up getting something weird happening, and we weren't able to put in that original field. But I would say 90% or more. So it's a pretty high percentage. I mean, we're not going to start that process unless we have a pretty good idea that there's a market for it at the end. So we're not, there's thousands of species I guess we could go after, but we're pretty selective on what we start. So. Okay.
Given the diversity of regions represented on this panel, are there any aspects or challenges of seed production that are unique to your geographic area?
Yeah, so I think this morning we talked a little bit about one of the sessions about water. That's one of our biggest challenges in the high plains of Texas, is having enough groundwater available to produce these. Outside of that, that would certainly be our biggest. Yep. Yep. Thank you. Melanie.
I'm better at questions than talking, so I'm gonna just go through this quick. And a lot of what Brett said is what goes through our operation too. Okay, so we were asked to talk about bridging the disconnect between restoration practitioners and local ecotype seed availability. Allen Dan Seed, we are a family-owned company. We are ecotype seed producers of 300 different native grasses and wildflowers. We've worked with many restoration specialists, practitioners from DOT, NRCS, Fish and Wildlife Biology, IRVMs. A lot of the partners that we work with are on some of those posters out there in the hallway. University of Northern Iowa and the Tallgrass Prairie Center. So some of the partners we work with represented out there. One of the restoration projects that we worked on probably 30 years ago was the Neil Smith Wildlife Restoration. I guess this would be an example of one of the ecotype projects we've worked on. They were wanting to restore 4,000 acres of tallgrass prairie. We worked with providing and multiplying out those ecotype seeds for this project from its inception, and took us about 7 years to get enough seed to get this 4,000 acres restored. And we're still 30 years later, they're still asking for a little bit of eco seed every now and then. We've got 40 years of experience in increasing local ecotypes. And we can start from anywhere from a handful of seed to larger quantities of seed. Some of the smaller seed lots will grow out in a greenhouse. We have 8,000 acres available to maintain plants under irrigation, and we do utilize third-party oversights for things like isolation distances and source identity paperwork. And then we utilize 8 different harvesters, from small machines to large machines, and even some of our small quarter-acre lots we still hand harvest. And we have several different types of seed cleaners, and we use dryers for drying the material down to appropriate moisture levels. And I guess that's about it. So I guess we're a resource that you can utilize for doing ecotype seeds. Okay. Questions or whatever?
That keep close to you. Shoot a question back. I'm not yet.
I didn't see any hands, so I'm dismissed. Yep.
I would like to know more about your hand harvest parts. Are those species that the seeds are hard to mechanize, hard
No, they're usually smaller lots. Small lots can get lost in machines, and you have contamination issues. So if we have customers that just have small pieces that can just be hand harvested, go straight in the dryers and clean separately, and we avoid those issues of losing materials and contamination issues. So I guess that's what the small stuff is done. Yes, sir.
Seems to me like Iowa is kind of a model for success in terms of using local ecotech. What's the secret?
Okay. That's not a problem. We've been doing it for 40 years. And like I said, you and I and the Tall Grass Prairie Center, they've got some posters out there, but the partnership works really well. And we have communication with education and certification with the Iowa Crop Improvements, or they do the third party. They kind of help make sure that any customers' requests are followed through. And then we also have multiple customers, so DOT, NRCS, CRP. So the funding for the success is there, along with the collections and the whole system works together. Like, did that answer your question? Okay. Oh, good. My sister's in the back, and probably 25%. But that's just specific projects. Some projects require 100%. Any help back there? So we're eco-type growers, but we sell into the commercial market. So not everybody in the commercial market's asking for the certification, but we do have certification for everything. Yeah.
So Chad, as a follow-up, do you mean that that you've got source identified seed that isn't sold to customers who demand it, but it's going out into the broader market? So some people are getting that even without.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
It's the problem in reverse. It's what everyone thinks the problem is. There's no local ecotype sometimes. Maybe you have too much. And so you can sell it outside the region.
Well, part of the funding, which has helped Iowa to be a success, was like the bees and butterfly pollination part of CRP, and we've been able to provide those wildflower species for those projects, and that's been helped with the success. So CRP involvement is tremendous for native restoration of ecotypes. I would encourage people to keep that in their programs. Yep.
Have you guys dealt with any seeds that are challenging with like the equipment that you're using to collect or to clean, and how do you figure it out?
Every year we try to improve and update those scenarios. So if we have an issue with a certain machine harvesting, we'll try it a different way.
What are some recent advances or successes in seed production in your region?
What's that? Oh. I don't know. I mean, it's all fun to work with, so it's all just the figuring things out is success to me, I guess.
Presenter, Laura Hurdle. She's the farm manager for the Institute for Applied Ecology.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Mara Friddle, and I'm the farm manager, like Melanie said, for the Institute for Applied Ecology. Our farm grows 36 different species of native forbs and grasses for seed amplification on 2.5 acres. Our smallest fields are 200 square feet, and our largest field is half an acre. I consider myself to be a small farmer who also works for an organization that does restoration work. That's the slide I should have started with. So here are some of the natives that we grow, and the cute bees that live on them. And I need to stop looking at my own slides. Okay, next up. So I'm here to highlight the necessity of small scale seed farmers to restoration efforts. And I'm defining small scale as having the ability to grow fields that are under 1/10 of an acre. Collecting seed from thriving remnant populations in areas where we are permitted to collect is a major bottleneck to performing restoration work. When all we can collect is a tiny palmful of seed, it's not possible to direct seed large acreage as you would other agronomic crops. While that amount of seed that comes from those acreages is the ideal, an intermediate step is often needed. One of the superpowers of the small farmer is the ability to take a palmful of seed, grow plugs to start a small field, and harvest pounds of seed from it. Those pounds can then be used to start large acreages for more seed production or to be direct seeded onto restoration sites. So I'd like to discuss a couple of challenges that the small native seed farmers face and offer some suggestions on how we can make this easier for them. One major challenge for small farmers is the tremendous amount of labor that it takes to produce native seed. In mainstream crops, cultivation and harvest technology allows a few people to reap hundreds of acres. Very little of that technology can be effectively used on small scale. So we are heavily reliant on labor to plant, weed, harvest, and clean our seed. Small farmers are already intimately aware of the amount of labor it takes to grow their crops, so a native field isn't necessarily harder than they are used to. Communicating this to prospective native seed farmers may help lure them in. When it comes to seed cleaning, the pieces of equipment that work best for native seed can be prohibitively expensive. I'd love to see small lot seed cleaning cooperatives where the cost of these machines could be shared amongst its members. Another significant challenge for the prospective farmer is figuring out how to produce these plants. Each species has its own secret code of requirements to grow. Some need to be nicked or scarified. Some need cold stratification to mimic winter weather. Still others need to be treated with acid to mimic passage through an animal's gut. The hard part is finding this information if it exists at all. Often I need to search multiple sources before I can cobble together a plan. A native plant production database with clear instruction would be a huge help. And then until that exists, we as native seed producers should be that resource for new farmers. The co-ops I mentioned could also serve as information sharing hubs. Quickly, next, I'd like to showcase a couple of farmers that I am helping to begin grow with the Coastal Native Seed Partnership and why they're perfect for this work. The first is Matt Borg of Matt Sin Farm in Albany, Oregon. Matt is a specialty legume breeder who was looking for a new challenge. Since his crops already required hand planting, weeding, and harvest, Matt was unfazed by the amount of work that a river lupin crop would require of him. I helped Matt choose the best plot for his lupin field, and we talked through logistics while touring his gorgeous farm. Looking for a similar change of pace, Teresa Retzlaff, who's the owner of 46 North Farm outside of Astoria, Oregon, will be converting a small plot of her cut flower farm to native seed production. Like Matt, Teresa's operation is already staffed and prepared for the work that these natives need to be successful. Teresa needed to start her field with plugs, but didn't have a greenhouse to start them in, so as part of her contract, IAE grew those plugs for her. We also will be cleaning that seed for her after harvest. These are just a couple of ways that we can help support new native seed farmers, and it's a joy to work with such passionate people. I really look forward to what they're able to grow in the coming years. I'd like to close by posing some questions for discussion that I'd love to hear some answers to is where and how do we find more of these small farmers and entice them to come over to the native side? How in restoration fields can we make it as easy as possible for prospective farmers to begin growing native seed? And how do we, as established native seed producers, most effectively share our knowledge with others to grow this field? I'm happy to open it up for questions, and thanks for your time.
Hi, thank you very much. And I was wondering, how do you kind of square the amount of investment that private growers make into getting these things available in the restoration market, and then that desire to share information? I see there's, I talk to growers, and some of them are very reluctant to share that very hard won information.
Sure.
I mean, we heard about the length of time it takes to bring something, into commercial availability. So how do you square those two things? Or maybe are there different categories of growers that could participate in information sharing that would help to kind of elevate things?
That's a great question, and I think you have to get people excited about restoration and sort of the bigger picture of restoration. So that sharing these little bits of information, these tidbits about how to grow and hand collect Calicortus, the hard stuff. It should never be proprietary. We're all in the same boat. If we're all in the restoration boat, we should be sharing this information as much as possible because that's how we get things done. It's not, in a vacuum. One thing that IAE does as part of a hybrid model of getting new growers contracted is we contract for acreage, not seed production. So that can actually provide farmers some safety in knowing that, some of these crops take many years to come on for a good harvest. Even if it's just a couple years, there's still a lot of labor that goes into that. But if we are contracting their labor for their acreage, they're still able to make money. I was hearing someone talk earlier today about another sort of hybrid model where there's incentive to get more seed off of their acreage. So that I love that idea too. Mm-hmm.
I have a similar question. Propagation protocols, how could we share more time away from farming to writing things down, and then
I wish I did. I think that, places like the Natural Resources Conservation Service can help publish more. There are websites that people are able to publish their protocols on. But again, I think we need to convince people that this should not be proprietary. Like, if the goal is restoration, that knowledge should be shared. Oh boy. Anyway.
some of us are federal agencies here. I feel myself anything that's paid for by the government shouldn't really be required to be right that into our agreements and grants that we have to, at the end of it, use growing protocol. And at least you go to Alaska and you do contact.
I can throw out a quick answer that was shared in the last session for that. So there's a website, the Native Plant Network, Reforestation Nurseries and Genetic Resources, that has plant propagation protocols included in there. And you can add your own propagation protocol from there.
Yeah.
I use that along with Google Scholar. There's tons of information on Google Scholar. Just throw in the genus species plant propagation protocol. You can get a lot of good information that has been forgotten to time.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned Ranger because that's the first place that I start to.
I was wondering if any of you
other people get interviewed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Can you hold that one for the end of the Q&A? Don't forget. So I think we're maybe one more quick question.
So in Alaska, we're trying to get grants to help of our soil water conservation districts that have land to grow native seed, and then that seed will be available to other people because they don't get food banks as yet. Or they can use it, but it's not proprietary, and we don't want to compete with the commercial growers, but we're trying to create a source, and so visiting those districts that are quasi-government, is a good way. I don't know if you guys have looked into the soil water conservation.
Yes, and we do actually work with them. Some IAE does. Yeah, no, they're a great resource. Absolutely. Thank you.
So our next speaker is going to be John Seymour. He's the president of Roundstone Native Seed.
All right, so again, I am John Seymour with Roundstone Native Seed. We're based out of Upton, Kentucky. And in Kentucky, the word Kentucky is a Huron word, and it means grassland. The Iroquois used the same word, and it meant great meadow to them. So at one time, historically, we had between 5 and 6 million acres of tall grass prairie. So right now, it's estimated that we have less than 1/100th of 1% of that left. I grew up a beef cattle and tobacco farmer. And in the late 80s and early 90s, we lost our support program for tobacco, and we could no longer legally raise it, which, that's okay. I'd rather do something a little bit better than killing people with cigarettes as far as that goes. So we were looking to diversify, and at the time, my father he's a self-taught botanist, and he was on the board of the Nature Conservancy, and we were doing work with them, and Mammoth Cave National Park also had needs for ecotype seed. So I grew up a purist. I grew up around botanists and farmers and kind of an odd eclectic mix, but 29 years ago this fall, my dad and I went out and let me digress just a little bit, where that Big Barrens region was, Kentucky, 5 to 6 million acres of tall grass prairie, Big Barrens region, and the remnants that are left, that's what we go after. So 29 years ago this fall, he and I went out with 5-gallon buckets and we set our watches. And we counted how many minutes it took us to get a pound of each species or half a pound. And since that time, we now raised a little over 200 different species of native grasses, wildflowers, and wetland plants. And we've pretty much recreated the same process that we've done in Kentucky, but we do it in all different areas. So although I'm based out of Kentucky, my home farm is, everything comes there to be clean and processed and mixed and set in temperature and humidity controlled environment. And we farm in 4 or 5 counties that surround us as well. We have our own property, we lease ground, we rent ground, we have partnerships with people, and we also have production in 7 other states. And most of those states are in the east and the southeast as well. So just like we did initially when we went out in the Big Barrens region, we also started going sometimes by contract, maybe a national forest or national park or private individuals. We would go out in the wild in any given region. And it might be in the mountains in West Virginia, the swamps in South Carolina, down on the sand dunes in Florida, hills and hollers in Kentucky, or underneath the longleaf pine ecosystem in the coastal plain. So we gathered these seeds from those areas, and basically here's our kind of our process. We still go out and we're to do our botanical survey to see what's there, so we can try and mimic nature when we make our mixes. We gather our specimens to verify what we've done and what we have, and then if everything's right, we go back and we have a recipe of what we're going to harvest at the given time we do so. We take that home and we put these small batches into the greenhouse. Oftentimes this will be representative of whatever area we chose to do, whether it was an ecotype or a regional ecotype over a broader area as well. Then when we raise that out, then we put that in the ground in a small nursery type setting. I know you can see in the pictures there are a lot of children. It's Kentucky and our child labor laws are very lax. So then what we start out with are these small nursery type settings. I can then take that seed and I can increase it, and I can make it available to the consumer at that point. Then it'll be clean, processed, put into our warehouse, that sort of thing as well. So I've been doing this a long time. Mark Twain said about Kentucky, he said, when the rapture happens, I hope I'm in Kentucky because they're 10 years behind everybody else. So I felt like I was about 29 years ahead of my time. So we've been doing ecotypes for a long time. I've been coming to these things. The people here, we got academia, we've got science-based thought. We have the people with the knowledge to know that we should be doing ecotypes. We believe in this. I grew up a purist. Also, I have to think about economics. But all these years we talk about the same thing, that we need it. We have a desire for it. But I would advocate that it's not necessarily supply and desire. We have to have end use. We have to have supply and demand with what we do. So can we do it? Yes, absolutely. We can do it. We can raise all kind of ecotypes from all kind of areas, and I love to do it. I think we all love to do it. But there is a cost associated with that. What a cost is a hurdle. We just have to find ways to get over those hurdles. For the first time in history, we have finances available to do what we want to do, available to do what we think we should do. Before, the argument was, well, those ecotypes are more expensive than cultivar varieties and valises. Absolutely they are. You had the good people at the PMCs busting their humps over 10 to 15 years to get these releases released. They put their heart and soul into it. And then at the end of the day, they say, okay, growers, here's this seed that we put our heart and soul into. Please grow it and do a good job with it. But they incurred the cost. That was taxpayer money, 10 to 15 years. Now, when we do it, that burden is upon us. So I would advocate that we find ways. The walk away today is partnerships. When we heard that this morning, I got super excited. I'm pumped about it because that's what I came here to talk about. But a little bit to my dismay, partnerships weren't mentioned with growers. And I hope that we would be considered as well, because this is what we do. We showed up here. This is what we're here for, and we like to do it. And I'd like to think we're good at it. And we can work in many ways. Myself, I would think I'm the poster boy for ecotypes. It's how I exist. Nobody gave me anything. We've always gone out and got it. Fortunately, I'm starting to work with different people. We do have some plant materials releases, but folks like Robin Mackey, when she worked at the Francis Marion National Forest, she was able to find funds when there were no funds to get a deliverable made, for us to come in and do those collections and then grow that out and make that back available to the Forest Service. Then we've got the Daniel Boone National Forest. We've got Mammoth Cave National Park. I've got Department of Defense, Fort Benning, Fort Stewart, Edmond Air Force Base, East Texas Natives, Lolly Creek. I got a whole list, Mississippi State, Daniel Boone National Forest, Jones Ecological Research Center, Arkansas Delta. All of these people, we have different partnerships in different ways, but we found a way to make it work. So I guess my last comment is this. We're here. We like what we do. We want to partner with you. Please don't forget about us. And if you give us a target to shoot for, I promise you we'll hit it. Don't worry about the mule. Just load the wagon. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What does my dollar go towards? How can we work with commercial growers to do that? Is it contract growing? Is it buying transplants? Is it pre-ordering seeds? I know you keep a lot of these ideas around, kind of from a producer side of things. Where does that money really go?
To be honest with us, it's been a combination of all. It's when I named off all those people, it's not been a set thing that we do. Sometimes you can contract grow, like she was talking about, on a per acre basis. Sometimes we'd come in on a contract to just in the Wayne National Forest just to go harvest a seed and give them that deliverable back. Sometimes we harvest a seed, we grow it out for them. Sometimes we harvest a seed, grow it out, and then make it available for production as well. But we can take on any facet of that. Some of us may not want to go out and do the hand harvest, but we can sure do the grow. Maybe we custom clean. But it's just being open-minded to work at any avenue that we can work together and working with other growers. I said I grow in 7 states, and I do have some full-time employees in some, but others like Arkansas Delta, you know, they're manning the wheel on those producers. We just work with them on it. Yes, sir. No, I'm kind of a gearhead, so we probably got 17 different types of harvesting equipment, but I still have a big crew of 12 guys and girls that we hand harvest a lot of the stuff. And that's just because when you put the pencil to it and watch your clock, it's quicker to hand harvest it than it is to machine harvest it and clean it. But then I have old Alice Chandler's all crop 66s from 1952 up to big case rotary combines and track combines and everything in between. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. If you have a wish list, when I say a wish list, at the end of the day, we got to have somebody that doesn't just wish for it, but wants to buy it. Let's just talk about it. You know, we try and hit on a bunch of workhorse species to start with. The fancy stuff, yeah, I'm good to start with it, but a little bit of it. I want to make sure that we can give you something that we're successful with every time. Maybe we've got 15 ecotypes of Indian grass, but they're not all going to act the same. But more than likely they will. Then we get into lobelias and things like that. That's going to change the picture for us. But we want a mix, something we can make in a mix. It's not going to do us any good to have 20 grasses and no forbs. We want some kind of good baseline habitat that we can build on after that.